We're now going to move on to another episode of Something About the Beatles. This is 173, and it's an interview that Robert did with Ray Connolly, who's a journalist and author.
Friend of the Beatles.
Yeah, he's great. And they had a great conversation, but there's some follow-up questions about it. Ray Connolly says that Yoko, well, at this point we know that Yoko is present in recording sessions. John wanted her to be there. It was his order that she join him. Certainly that is unsettling to the other Beatles. They're not used to that. But the question, he describes Yoko as being, quote, difficult during the recording sessions. How is she difficult?
I think, first of all, there's her presence there. And as much as she, to whatever degree, wants to be a fly on the wall, just sort of sit back and watch, she's still attached to John's hip. And no matter what they do, he's going to be engaging her constantly. How's that, love? That kind of thing. So it's not like she's just sitting there in the background, which would have been, to that point, to the extent that they had visitors at Beatles sessions, which was a pretty rare thing. They mostly absolutely kept their distance. And we know once Linda started coming around, she too she saw her place very much as in the background. She's not, unless asked, participating in anything. Mm-hmm. She's very much in the background. It's funny that the first song they track for the White Album, so therefore the first song that she's present for at EMI as part of a Beatles recording session, that she's now officially in the circle, which is distinct from the first session she actually witnessed, which is not Hey Bulldog, as you described later on in Lennon Remembers. It was Fool on the Hill in September of 67. A fortnight after Brian's gone, that was the first time, having stalked him, for lack of a better word, for the last year or so, that she actually got admitted to their place of work. And there's a nice picture of them talking in that session, but that wasn't the same thing. They weren't a couple yet. Mm-hmm. Now they're a couple. So very early on, they're tracking Revolution 1, and interestingly, by this point, this is end of May, this starts first week of June, that Paul, who's still officially engaged to Jane Asher, mm-hmm. they go to Brother Michael's wedding, which I think was June 7th or so. Mm-hmm. Francie Schwartz is there. Okay. She was a New York aspiring filmmaker who had responded to some she'd read in Rolling Stone about the Beatles are looking for artists to come to Apple, and then they get that news conference in May in New York saying much the same thing. They get on their knees in somebody's office, probably yours. She was ready in London. She'd gotten a leg up. So she came to Apple with a script, wanted to get a film made, and at some point, Paul and her connected. Mm-hmm. And then she moved into Cavendish at some point. I don't think the timetable is exact. We know when she came to London, and we also know that she's present from the start of the White Albums, as was Yoko. Mm-hmm. So I think there is a certain belief that John and Yoko sort of opened the door, and then the Paul and Linda came from that. But it sounds like Francie was there right away too, because she has said that she is singing the shooby-doo-wops on that and contributing other things. There's pictures and film of her at different points throughout the White Album sessions, so she's definitely around. Anyway, so Yoko's there. As far as her being disruptive goes, without asking Ray directly, I don't know what he's referring to, but if I had to hazard a guess, what is known, and this was people at Apple that were describing how she was treating everybody like servants. Mm-hmm. She was literally making demands on the staff as if she was too one of the co-owners or had an interest in it other than being John's girlfriend, that she was commanding people around to do errands for her and things like that.
And this is even initially, almost right from the get-go.
Right from the get-go, because they become a couple in May, officially, and they do the Esher demos end of May, start the White Album sessions right after. So as far as her being disruptive in the sessions, we do know that during the Let It Be sessions, which is well after the White Album, so we don't know everything that goes on in the White Album sessions other than they themselves describing the tension during it. Yes. And that is supported by Jeff Emmerich quits in July. Right. He won't even finish out the week. Yeah. It's because things are getting really heated. Ringo quits in August. There's a whole story about I felt like I was the outsider and feeling unloved. Well, we know a little bit more contemporaneously that it was actually a very specific reason that he quit. It was Paul getting all over him about his drumming on Back in USSR. Mm-hmm. That's what caused him to leave, as told by Maureen Starkey when she was interviewed about it. And so he spontaneously leaves. George Martin, a little later, he decides, I'm not quitting, but I'm taking a break.
A long vacation.
Yeah, here you go, Chris Thomas. You be the producer for a while.
Yeah.
And he's this 21-year-old assistant producer, so suddenly he finds himself producing a Beatles session.
Yeah.
And they're fine with that because they see themselves as more or less producing themselves at that point anyway.
Yeah.
So he's just kind of a supervisor or an extra hand. So it is clear that there are tensions going on. And you can't separate what's going on in the studio from what's happening at Apple. And that's where you have the great quote from Derek Taylor, I've never hated anybody as much as I hated Paul McCartney in summer of 1968.
Yeah.
And he liked Paul.
Yes.
So that speaks to when Paul's taking on so much of the responsibility of running Apple. And I guess as examples of this, there were like memos written from Paul and quotes of how he's treating the staff, which by our standards would be a toxic workplace. So you've got that going on. He's with Francie, who he wasn't uniformly kind to. And, things are getting heated in the studio. So all that's going on. Yeah, Yoko is there, part of it. Whether that is informing his short-temperedness because he doesn't know how to deal with it, it seems like he tries awfully hard to be accommodating to John because he's trying to hold this band together. And he sees John as a very important part of that is at risk at any point from leaving because he wants to do John and Yoko stuff. So that's where Paul is at. As far as Yoko being disruptive, as far as
I want to emphasize his word was difficult as opposed to disruptive. Maybe that's what he's saying.
Yeah, let's retake that.
Yeah.
Okay. So as far as Yoko being disruptive,
difficult is the
okay,
word.
sorry.
That's okay. I don't care.
As far as Yoko being difficult, so telling people what to do, commanding people to be her servants is one thing. And, she came from a background, a wealthy background, was used to actually having servants around. So maybe it was just, where her head was at. But we don't have any specific evidence or incidents we can point to during the White Album. So move forward to the Let It Be sessions, which are mostly filmed or taped. She is certainly chiming into the conversations where John is silent. We've got an awful lot of that. The minute George quits, she commandeers his seat and start a Yoko jam.
Right.
So if that's being difficult, I mean, it's injecting herself into an opportunity is what it is.
Right.
Then there's the story during the Abbey Road sessions of George's digestive biscuits, which to Americans are cookies, and her helping herself. Yeah. I guess was unwritten Beatle law. You don't touch anybody else's food. So, and, per Emmerich telling, which take a massive grain of salt, he says, "You bitch!" And John didn't defend her.
Yes,
so,
right.
But that was also the time, Abbey Road sessions, where following the car accident, not only do they, because she's on bed rest, and he is going to be damned if he's going to be separated from her to work on this album while she's recuperating from the car accident. So they order a bed from Harrods to come, which we now have pictures of as of 2013.
Right.
And so she's there. Not only does she have a bed, but she's got a microphone.
Right.
So if now she is a sort of de facto member of the Beatle crew to where she can chime in on takes and, make her input known. Right. Yeah, I guess that would be disruptive or difficult.
Well, let me just, one follow-up question to that. It seems that she got more involved as the Beatles' career progressed in Let It Be and Abbey Road being in the studio. What about the White Album? Do you feel she was making any comments, suggestions about the music they were recording during the White Album?
As far as anything specific goes, I mean, she contributes. She's on Birthday, she's on Bungalow Bill.
Right.
So we have her stepping to the mic, as it were.
Right.
As far as comments go, it's funny that the one quote we have from John, from her in the studio in 68, he says in Lennon Remembers that the first session was Hey Bulldog. That was February 11th, 1968. So it's pre-White Album. It's not her first time in the studio. We know that she's caught on film at the Fool on the Hill session. Now, the Hey Bulldog session was filmed. She doesn't show up in it. So whether she was there or not, I don't know. But John, in describing that moment, said that he was embarrassed when she criticized the Beatles, saying, "Why do you use the same beat all the time?" The future queen of dance remixes saying, "Why do you use the same beat all the time?" Expecting, I don't know, something more avant-garde or something, but this is her learning curve in rock and roll. So that's the one quote I can fine that most fans are familiar with of her calling out what you're doing in the studio to Beatles.
And what song was that?
Hey Bulldog.
That's Hey Bulldog. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I mean, it's straight 4/4 beat.
Sure.
Yeah. I don't know. If it turned into a waltz, it would be a very different record.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's anything else she commented on. Now, he's given her all this latitude, of course.
Right.
And not only is she contributing vocally, Revolution 9 is basically John and Yoko collaboration, which they start working on right away, pretty early on in the sessions. So she's getting a seat at the table right away. Now, it's very well documented George's disdain for Yoko.
Yeah.
And it gets increasingly heated by the time of the Let It Be sessions, where the current scholarship is that despite their stories under oath and their depositions when Paul's suing them end of 70, going into 71 to free himself of APCO and the Apple contract, that they sort of spin it that George quit the Beatles because of a dispute with Paul, a musical dispute. And of course, the moment they point to is, I'll play whatever you want me to play on January 6th, which in the bigger context is not this big deal, but it got so magnified by being the Let It Be film. Everybody's like, oh man, that's so ugly, especially when Paul throws Hey Jude in his face about, this like a bit like Hey Jude, where, George wanted to do the little answering guitar lines and Paul didn't.
Yeah.
More on that. Did anybody wonder why there's two versions of Isn't It a Pity on All Things Must Pass?
Yeah.
Because one is a Hey Jude clone and the other one isn't. And he does have little answering guitar lines in the version one of Isn't It a Pity, and the na-na-nas at the end is like 1 second shorter, it clocks in, than the actual Hey Jude record. So I think that's George's way of saying there's more than one way of doing a good song, Paul.
Yeah.
But anyway, where was I going with that?
I think we're good.
Okay.